Okay. Well, let me introduce our panelists and explain a bit their fantastic bios, which I try to sum up because they have a lot of content. First, we have Danchen Zhao. Well, we're going to start here from this side, no? Josep Luis, no? Josep Luis Sanfeliu is managing partner and co-founder of Asabis, a venture capital firm investing in health tech. Joseph's background comes from intellectual property law, pharma, finance, and started in venture capital 15 years ago. It doesn't seem so. And is a co-founder of iOS Capital. So please join me to welcome him. Next to him, we have Jordi Ferrer. He's investment director in Skip2B Venture, an impact venture capital fund aiming to reduce health inequalities and improve people's quality of life by investing in patient-oriented startup. Thank you, Jordi, for being here.
My pleasure.
We have Danchen Zhao. She is the investment director of MTIP, has been investing in digital health for the past 5 years, and currently, as the investment director, she provides growth capital to high-potential startups in their phase of commercial scale-up. So thank you. Join to welcome her. And finally, Fergus Barclay is an associate at Oakland partner at Tech M&A and Fundraising Boutique, where he supports startups in their corporate development growth plans. So thank you very much for joining us. So, first of all, I think we need to, as the presenter was saying, establish the basics, no? And I would like to know what are we talking about now, what we understand by digital health. So I don't know if, Danchen, you could touch on this part and just put the framework of what we are talking about.
Yeah, very happy to. Thank you for this question, Veronica. I guess looking at this room here and everyone that's present, we also heard from the authorities, it's probably in everyone's interest to keep the definition broad, because this is how we get the buy-in of all the important stakeholders in the healthcare ecosystem, right? So we have the stakeholders like the providers, the clinics and hospitals. We have stakeholders like the insurance companies, the payers. We have the stakeholders, of course, as Christian also mentioned, the patients, right? Like very important. So if you think of that, digital health could just be everything that falls under healthcare, but has a digital component. So if it's technology for pharma industry, life sciences, driving science, if it's technology for providers, for clinics and hospitals, increasing or improving their workflow, or if it's technology for the patient, such as connected devices and digital therapeutics, which I think Joe will go into details to, that's all under the umbrella of digital health. I hope this answers the question.
Yes, thank you very much. And I also think it's very important as well to understand how is digital health in the current healthcare market. So I don't know if Josep Luis, you can touch base on that.
Well, we've been monitoring the health tech industry for many years. Since I started investing in VC, first investment was back in 2015 in a company for the digital health tracking and digital medicine monitoring for pregnancy. It was a company in DC, Babyscripts, together with Startup Health and GE. I remember those times in which the first physicians were getting involved in these clinically validated and medical grade technologies. But that was the exception, because at the time, most of the technology that we saw coming into healthcare was basically for the efficiency in hospital processes, logistics around pharmacy and prescriptions. It was more an e-commerce type of thing, and to make things easier within a very complex, and as Christian pointed out, there's so many touch points that making those touch points within the healthcare flow of products and services for patients to get the therapies, that was what everything started for. But now, I think it's very important that we all realize that quality and safety are going to be, has been for many years in the pharma industry, the name of the game. And clinical value, which means validation, economic relevance for the healthcare systems, savings, patient outcomes, and patient-centric real benefits that indirectly benefit the healthcare systems and the world in general. This is what is going to be the name of the game. The wearables, nice to have data that's not talking to anything else, just to you, knowing how many heartbeats you have every minute. That doesn't mean anything. I mean, science and technology by itself, it's not something that it's fancy, it's nice. We all bought those Fitbits 10 years ago for Christmas, right? And nobody's wearing them anymore. Now we're wearing other stuff, but this stuff needs to talk to someone else. And no, it's not a surprise that Google ended up buying Fitbit. But this is exactly the evolution, because if you look at the main investments by Google, by Apple, the last Apple Watch, by the way, Apple is selling more watches than the whole Swiss watch industry since 2 years or 3 years ago. But it's not about the watch. It's about the temperature now for ovulation purposes, for measurement, or it's the heartbeat that they're registering. And the point is, where is that going? Data. And what we're using with that. And that has to do with patient outcomes, clinical validation, proving to the community, payers, private and public payers, clinical and physicians that are around these hospital settings that will only rely on real data. Sometimes also there's an evolution also in how this data is being captured. So sensors are going to be critical, because it's fine to have an app that's registering data, but it's patient-reported data. If you rely on patients doing stuff on your cell phones, they can perfectly get confused between, making a like in Instagram and reporting their heartbeat levels. It's like we are still in the next wave of waiting for real sensors that data becomes reliable. Mm-hmm. So all in all, to your question, I think the market is super expanding. Mm-hmm. Technology entrants, like the big tech giants getting in, from Meta to Apple, we know all that from the headlines. But there's another reality, which is payers, members of the Barcelona Health Cup, insurance companies, and I see Luis here, an expert in the insurtech health. These guys coming in crazy. We have companies that we've invested with, together with Anthem, Optum, these guys are coming in, and the pharma industry finally looks like they're coming in. So everybody's coming into an ecosystem that is delivering a lot of technology and science. And it was a very good also piece of data that Christian showed before about how the seed financing is going, even in the classification and ranking, capturing number one position in financing. So I think it's good news. It's expanding, and now specialization and clinically driven validated value proposition technologies to healthcare and patients is going to be more than ever the name of the game.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. And I would like to understand, because it's surprising, as you said, it's a market that is expanding. However, we've seen those figures that I was saying before about decrease, maybe globally rather than in Europe, the amounts of funding dedicated to that. So I don't know, Fergus, if you can explain us a bit more on that vision, why in Europe we've seen that difference between globally and Europe.
Sure. So the global macroeconomic context has had a significant impact on fundraising across all sectors and geographies. And at Oakland Partners, we've witnessed this firsthand this year, the difficulty in raising funds for our clients. Many VCs have been cautious in taking on new deals. I can't speak for yourselves here, but perhaps so. And choosing instead to focus on their existing portfolio companies. And this trend has had a bigger impact on larger deals, where we've seen a decline in deal size and valuations. So in the US, the dominance of larger deals makes it no surprise then that we've seen a nearly 1/3 drop in funding growth from Q1 to Q2 this year, whilst Europe has seen a 6% increase that you showed. But I think we should note that Alan's 200 million nearly growth round takes up about 20% of that figure for the period. And I think it's important, though, to set the context of the digital health investment landscape since COVID. The industry has boomed, and rightfully so, with innovations in tech and adoption by consumers. We've seen in Q2 this year more capital deployed than nearly all quarters prior to Q3 2020. And this contraction, we're saying this year, should also be seen in the context of 2021, which saw more capital deployed than 2013 to 2017 combined. This has had a sort of follow-on effect for valuations, as we've seen, but actually in early stage deals, the valuations have remained relatively strong. And we predict that this will continue to do so, mainly because of the innovations in new tech and a lot of the time in AI, which is really fortifying the value of these companies. So really looking forward, we're very optimistic on the future of the European digital health landscape. Large number of deals are attracting international investors from Europe and beyond. And we're now seeing European investors with record levels of dry powder, having raised, I think, about $20.1 billion in the first half of this year alone.
Great, thank you.
Veronica, could I maybe build on this?
Sure.
So thank you for this answer. This is actually also what we observe in the market. So basically in 2021, there were a lot of, let's say, tourist digital health investors because it was a very hot market because of the pandemic. There were a lot of generalist investors coming in. And as Joe was mentioning, healthcare technology, digital health, it's kind of a complex area to invest in, right? Like you have the regulatory hurdles, you need to understand the ecosystem, what does every stakeholder want out of this, you need to show clinical evidence. So all these aspects are not very easy to understand for the generalist investors. So what we see now is actually also in the data that lots of the tourists investors in this space would actually go away in this year. And to answer your question, looking at my fund actually starting from March when the downturn started a bit, we have done 2 new investments, and I think that's also what we see across other funds that are, let's say, more of the health tech veterans to build on this.
Let me add one, sorry, Jordi, one more point on this because I want to give a message of consistency and good news. To me, in our interpretation at Asavis, we've been monitoring this market, the fundamentals are so strong. Okay. The data that we saw before, the macro fundamentals of healthcare and where we're going, 80% of US and most Western economies, pathologies and chronic illnesses rely on lifestyle. So it has to do with our ways of behaving every day, and that's what technology can change and track. So, and this is chronic diseases like metabolic diseases like diabetes, etc. But so the fundamentals are there, and they will remain. And I mean, it's obvious. But in the last years, this technology and access to medicine through technology obviously rose because of COVID. Mm-hmm. And everybody, generalists and non-specialized investors, jumped into those opportunities very fast because it was in the newspapers every day. And then the third thing that happened was there was a financial revolution in the US in the last 2 years. The name was SPAC. And SPAC and market-driven speculation by healthcare non-specialized investors pushed prices and valuations. Remember, Teladoc was $13 billion valuated company. I'm not saying it's great, it's not a good valuation, I'm just saying that was outrageous. But so my point is, to your comments and building on, so we were coming from a hype, and now we're seeing relatively downturns, but it's relative to where we were at, and it was probably that too much inflated, or a little bit of speculation behind it. So now we're going, obviously it's a pendulum thing, and now we're going there, but I still believe it's positive because now we're facing probably a new moment of correction, which is obvious.
So we are on a normalization path, no? So
that's our view.
Okay. So, and I would like to know when to invest in digital health, Jordi. I don't know if you can explain a bit, because we've seen that it's a great opportunity. We've seen a hype also. So when should we invest there?
Anytime, and I would say now is the moment, and this is why we're here. We are at this great event, 4th edition. I heard 700 people plus a few hundreds also connected. Last week there was also a great event in Milan. We've seen that healthcare is the highest space in investment, in early investment in Spain, so it is definitely the moment. I completely agree with my colleagues. All that what they've said, it's correct, it's right. There's for a few years now, there's been quite a few adoption within pharma for clinical validation, also for enhancing adherence and let's say companion products for pharma. There's payers are starting to adopt, insurances are the ones that are really jumping in. They have all this data from their insurees, and technology can really enhance that. Maybe because of the panelist challenges, I would say there's this adoption that is yet to be validated. Providers are maybe not adopting so much. Again, last week there was some data about the DiGA, the reimbursement system from Germany, which is pioneer in Europe. Only 4% of prescriptions from DiGA come from actually from providers, from clinicians. So there's a long way in there, and technology can enable a lot. Can enable early diagnostics, population screening. We're not seeing there yet. But definitely we have to invest now, so we can see it the sooner the better, definitely.
Okay, great.
And maybe to build on that, if I may.
Yeah, sure.
So actually, I found it a very...
process,
Yeah.
many years. I was a biotech investor in 2008. We had financing rounds of Series A's of 10, 20 million euros. Why? Because you have to prove everything. Then you had the little brother, which at the time was MedTech, valves and stimulation devices and all that. Those got a CE mark in a fragmented, previously regulated by a directive regulation, which was the previous directive for medical devices. With a 2 million euro, you can start a company. And then we'll see if we make another one of 5. What happened? Regulation came in.
Okay.
The new regulation came in. Everyone started going away from medical device. Why? Because now you realize that the Series A of 2, this is the way it should be. Because otherwise you don't have the resources to prove what the payers, the physicians, the community, the patients, the regulators will ask for, which is safety, quality, and clinical evidence and clinical relevance.
I completely agree with you, but I would challenge something. There's a caveat in there. In your comparison with biotechnology, is that biotechnology has very tall entry barriers, has IP, has a very clear path to market. And digital health is in this space yet, trying to find out what's the path to market, what is the entry barriers going to be, who is going to be able to have it.
You're
so
right.
This gray space.
I was really referring to digital therapeutics.
Yeah,
so you're completely right. But I was talking more on the therapeutics. Everything else probably has a different view. You're right. Yeah.
And which are the digital health attractive segments then to invest?
The Savis, since we all come from pharma, and we all come from this background, everything has to do with clinically validated, highly regulated, medical-grade technologies, big sensors, big technology, digital medicine. That is what it's our sweet spot. But don't get us wrong. Savis is a venture capital firm. We make money because, first of all, thanks to entrepreneurs, but because of our investors investing in us. So we have to look at opportunities that grow fast, and in areas where there's M&A and corporate development activity. So there might be great areas in which yet nobody is making acquisitions, or areas in which there's still a monopoly by a big player. So we might not invest sometimes, not because the technology is not great or the team is amazing, it's just because we don't see the link to our model, which is making a capital gain out of the investments we do. So these are the two areas, digital medicine, digital therapeutics, with an angle with pharma, an angle with payers, and that's where we play, and this is where we see the opportunities. But this is our view, because that's our business. But
I completely agree. I would also add that there's a huge opportunity in anything that can bring more productivity to providers, and the great example is AI in radiology, for instance. And also Christian said it before, or it was said before, the lack of providers, right? And we are facing it, we're seeing it, population growing, population getting older, and less clinicians every time. So whatever that helps clinicians increase their productivity, I think it's a good opportunity too.
Mm-hmm. So
maybe just to add to these 2 points, so you have like the provider side, but also like the science side. So from our perspective, what's also interesting to invest in is basically wherever you have, first of all, the generated data, and then data analytics, and then the insights that you derive from the data analytics, you would actually be able to monetize them. So in a way, it's important to understand the data flow, but also the money flow. So looking at profit pools, right? Currently, Big Pharma, they have a lot of money. They're paying consultants actually on an hourly basis to derive insight. where this insight you can actually derive based on a software. So you analyze data that maybe comes from clinical trials, you curate them, you structure them, you get the same type of insights to help them with their decision-making process, and they would pay for that. Another example that we actually really like is tech-enabled services. So there, again, you collect the data, you analyze the data, and then you basically use the insights that you get from this data analytics to improve the services. And this goes back to things like reimbursement, like CPT codes, right? Like, so it's an established money flow that's already flowing, and we're just like selecting the companies that can sit on that money flow. Like, they don't need to create anything new, but they just come in, take the CPT codes, and use this tech-enabled services as their way to monetize their technology.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. And we were mentioning before the surprising decrease in the deal size and also in the M&A transaction. I don't know, Fergus, if you could give us more color regarding those data.
So deal sizes, I think, has been most impacted for larger deals across the board. With earlier stage, it's kind of just been a natural trend over the years for early stage deals to get bigger and bigger and bigger. You look at the US and it's kind of its own world. You can see seed rounds of 100 million, and you know it doesn't quite add up when you're comparing seed rounds of 2 to 3 over here. But yeah, I think the key takeaway that we've taken looking at the trends over the past year or so is really that early stage investing is continuing to stay strong, and especially in Europe. It's been the larger deal sizes which have been impacted, and those corresponding valuations. Mm-hmm. Whereas in our earlier stage deals, investors have perhaps been tougher negotiators on valuations, but typically they're holding strong, and if not, it's more so the case that the selection criteria for investors is just stricter. So perhaps it's less companies getting funded, but they are still raising strong amounts and at strong valuations too.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. So, and Danchan, could you explain us how far are we from recurring revenues in life science tech? And I guess that makes the liaison with the valuations that Fergus was mentioning.
Yeah, definitely, and it also makes the liaison with like the human relationships, right? So we talk to a lot of companies that think that once they have signed a deal with Big Pharma, this is recurring revenue. This is not how it works, right? So there, it's a human relationship. You actually, a lot of companies start with like marketing and sales, and then they end up realizing that they need a customer success team, because you need to like have people that take care of your clients so that there's no churn. So this is actually something that we realized in the past couple of years, where I just want to stress that, you know, recurring revenue is something we as an ecosystem need to work on by building relationships, by listening to each other, figuring out what the other party really wants, what does pharma really need, what does the life science industry really need, right, in this case, in order to make sure that they actually renew the contracts, which is important.
So thank you. So what are investors looking for in this sector? And moreover, Jordi, that's for you. What are the impact investors looking for?
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the question. We are indeed Impact Venture Capital Fund. We have a vertical that is specialized in healthcare. And I think technology from the impact point of view is bringing many things, but most importantly two. One is that impact investing is all about reporting outcomes. It's transparency and measurability of results. And technology is allowing this direct-to-patient report. And this is something that is very good, of course, for the industry, but for impact investment. And the other one is the accessibility and getting equity and equality in healthcare. Technology helps democratizing and helps reaching health access to more people. So these are the main two drivers that make us willing to invest in digital health.
Okay. And José Luis, how do you see the involvement of the pharma industry and medtech industry in digital health? We were touching that point before, but
yeah. One of the challenges for investors in digital health or the investment community is that now companies really attract different sort of investors, which is exactly the beauty, and it reflects the fundamentals. So when I say the fundamentals are fine, it's not just a bunch of investors and financial players putting money into companies. It's that this money is coming from different places, and that is what, to me, confirms that this is a very attractive industry and a very attractive place to be. Take an example like CaraCare, again, one of our portfolio companies in Berlin, DIGA approved, selling 250 euros per month per prescription per patient, paid by the German government and showing a lot of evidence now. It's one of the 13 recurrent revenue based on prescriptions. We invested in this company together with Johnson & Johnson. So we accessed this deal, we submitted to J&J, we worked with them for a long time. I've been an investor with J&J for many years in different medtech and pharma companies, and in this case, they joined this digital healthcare company. So now we see the pharma industry sitting in the board together with us. The company, CaraCare, had a very interesting deal, commercial one, with Sanofi for the expansion of its technology into French and the UK market. That was some years ago, 2 years ago. So now we have a partnership with one pharma, a shareholder which is in the pharma industry, which is also in the company and in the board. And now, very recently, just 3 months ago, we got the attention or brought the attention of a new investor that came in again from the nutrition industry. So you have now Danone, Nestlé Health Sciences, and in this case, Dr. Schaar, which is the #1 company in gluten-free, based in Austria.
I know them well.
It's yellow. I'm not going to do advertisement, but I'm very happy that the industry, also the food industry, is getting into digital health. Why? Because, again, it's lifestyle stuff. Actually, the app, the technology from CaraCare is a lot of artificial intelligence and algorithms behind the usage of an app that's basically suggesting lifestyle tips versus a bunch of cocktail prescribed drugs that patients for inflammatory bowel syndrome used to get in replacement for their symptoms, which are plenty and diverse, because each patient in IBS has different symptoms. That's why it's a syndrome. Anyway, to your question. So we are seeing the pharma industry finally getting in seriously. Obviously, you have experiences, and people in the room know about the local players. You have Almirall getting very strongly into dermatology with a digital component, making some sort of investments. We just came now from Frontiers Health, which was last week in Milano. The pharma was there, has been there. For many years, the pharma has been like the Loch Ness monster. You know? Everybody talks about them, but nobody sees them. I think more for the European pharma industry, I think, with the exception of Novartis Venture Fund and some other cases. So I really would emphasize the importance of the pharma industry joining the startup community, which in Spain, now that we are in Barcelona, Esteve, Ferrer, Almirall, Grifols, Werfen, all these guys should be actively part of this, and I invite Luis to call them to join the Barcelona Health Hub, but to actively participate, not only sponsoring events, but also joining us as investors. They can minimize the risk in many ways, and they can join us. But the challenge for us, investors, financial ones, is that we have to deal with this, let's say, different species of dinosaurs that we had to manage. Some are diplodocus, some are, sorry, I have a 9-year-old kid, so I always relate to that. Velociraptors.
I know them well as well. I
thought. Anyway, so, but I think they're coming in, and the challenge will be to manage this relationship in a very structured way inside the company, not only outside and building partnerships, but also getting them involved. But there's many, many examples. I don't have the data here now, but J&J, Novartis Venture Fund, Merck Ventures had a fund dedicated to it. So, but we still miss, I think, the serious European pharmaceutical involvement. In this data that you shared about the Europeans still resisting, I would love to see how much of this resistance has been the contribution for pharma. I will look up this data, they're interesting.
So Joe, I might have some interesting data for you in that case. So by the way, I completely agree with you, because usually if you look at other sectors, corporate VC has kind of a bad reputation. This might not be the case in healthcare investments, because again, like we have this ecosystem or the stakeholders, and the other stakeholders, when they come in as a co-investor, they actually can add a lot of value, right? Be it on the commercial side, guaranteeing revenue in some cases with a commercial agreement, or be it in other types of collaboration, as you mentioned, nutrition and so forth. So definitely agree. And the data to back it up, so I played around with some PitchBook data, very happy to share with you guys. Apparently corporate involvement actually contributes to success, defined as a company reaching profitability in the health tech sector, which is quite surprising, let's say, for many investors.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, I would like, we have other things to touch base, but I would like to open questions to the public if there's anything that they want to ask to those experts. Yeah, the microphone.
I have one.
Yeah, great.
Hello, my name is Peter Krol, I'm from Medify. Well, I'm actually wondering, because you guys are talking about investing and investing money in these kind of companies, but we as entrepreneurs, we want to help the patient.
It was one of the questions I was missing.
I saw your list. No, so I think that's also what you should think about. So also the pharmaceutical companies, maybe I'm not sure if I want a pharmaceutical company inventing my company, for example. It's because, so I actually want to address this question. How do you think about investing in these companies, and what do you think the entrepreneurs will think about? Do they need the money, or do they do it for the patients? How can you convince them to invest in them? That's actually the question.
Yeah, I would love to take this one if I may.
Yep.
So Peter, really great question, by the way. So if you think about healthcare in the past, right? Because I really understand where it comes from. So if you think about healthcare in the past, you had kind of the patient somewhere floating, and then you have all these like stakeholders of the healthcare ecosystem that have no link to them, right? You have the pharma companies, you have the healthcare services, you have the medtech companies, you have the payers, but the patient doesn't really talk to any of them. So this is actually where digital health comes in, right? Like you as an entrepreneur, you come in, you look at like how these, like let's say dinosaurs, right, like, of the industry, what are they doing to digitalize? What type of data are they generating? And how can you come in, use this data layer, do an analysis on them, and then build products based on insights of those that would then enable patient engagement, right? To give you an example, traditional healthcare services, it was usually, as Christian mentioned, on the site, right? Like you have to go, it's centralized, you have to go to a place. If you come in and you make this possible in a decentralized way, and you maybe have an app to engage with the patient, to like improve patient experience, you suddenly build this link between the patient and the traditional healthcare services that not only helps the services, but definitely also the patient, because here they're engaged. By the way, they're contributing data which further allows personalization, because once your personal data flows into it, algorithms on that run on that, you would be able to get personalized treatment advice back, right? So this is how you contribute to this ecosystem with the data flow, but ultimately, your question, right? Like, and I think this has to do with impact.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I wanted to add into this. So, as I said, the question is really good. Thank you very much for the question, and also completely agree with what you were saying. At Chip2B Ventures, we are impact investors. What this means is that our main goal of the healthcare vertical is to improve people's quality of life. So we only invest in projects that can measurably and directly, through KPIs reported on a quarterly basis, improve people's quality of life on a clinical level. Now, back to the investment question. Do companies need investment? Yes, because of what we've been saying of the regulatory requirements, of the clinical, the validation, everything. It's a very demanding sector that has a lot of requirements and that needs a lot of money to deploy. But definitely the person, and I'm not even going to say patient, because the person, and now I'm talking about prevention, about population screening, the person is in the center, and it's all about the person. So yeah, great question, and definitely we have to keep the people in the center. providers and payers probably are more oriented towards the person because it's with whom they treat, either on a cost or on a treatment basis, but it's with whom they treat. Pharma has kind of two waves. One, digital health is helping a lot in clinical, or can potentially help a lot in clinical trials and making them more effective, therefore less costly, therefore hopefully by transitivity, lower costs of treatment, but this is yet to be confirmed. We don't know yet. And then on the other hand, there's all these companion tools that, as we were saying before, might help in the adherence of treatments, might help in the mental well-being of certain chronic diseases during treatment, for instance, and definitely help the patient too. So absolutely, it's all about the patient. Yeah.
If I may add, and I'm not an expert on that, but I think my background in investment banking would bias me the answer, sorry for that. But I understand that putting the patient as the center or the person as the center is the value you are adding as entrepreneur, and I think is what you are giving to the market. But I guess that in order to have impact and to really reach a lot of these patients, we need investments, and that is what makes us possible. So I think it's a good combination about I won't say romantic, because it's not romantic, it's practical, the way to put the patient in the center. But I think in order to just impact the most number of people possible, the investment are needed, and we cannot forget that this industry, or what we were saying, pharma industry, they have a lot of firepower, so why not to combine both powers, no? So it would be my...
I think the challenge is how to get people really using in the end all the solutions. I think that's Joseph who already, it was Joseph who really telling about the watch we all have.
Yeah.
But we could have it, but in the end we should understand why all this data is very important and why we can, let's say, extend our lives maybe and live healthier when we really make use of these kind of solutions and data.
Mm-hmm.
And
so that's why I understand you invested in it.
No, what you're raising is very important. Sometimes we are so much into our everyday analysis. We get 10 business plans a week. We study reports, we do the financial analysis, we talk to so many people.
Tests.
So sorry for sometimes forgetting about patients, which is, in this place, I think nobody never forgets about patients, but it's because we are all around this healthcare hub in Barcelona in a hospital. So it's like we take for granted that we are caring about people, but sometimes we forget about expressly mentioned, so thanks.
Okay, thank you as well.
And if I may add to the last point about the data, I think we are all hoping and wishing for interoperability of data, so we can really exponentially use it and provide further solutions.
Okay, we have 3 minutes. I don't know if there's any other question. Let's take advantage now.
Yes, please. I am Franca Oppici from Medical Sapiens. I'm an entrepreneur. Our company is looking to give support for medical diagnosis. And we found a very difficult trouble to get physicians, because sometimes physicians don't want to be helped in his work. It's very, very difficult. We are going to the patients, and patients are looking for a diagnosis on time and certain. And sometimes physicians don't give this diagnosis on time, difficulting the medical condition of the patient. We all know that the error in medical diagnosis in the world is near 30%. So we are looking to help patients with this difficult problem. And as physicians don't want this help. For us, it has been very difficult to make a clinical evaluation. That's the problem we have. We now made a new application that is a triage and a pre-consultation to help patients. But our main application is for physicians and is based on AI, in ethical AI. So I would like to ask if is there a possibility to have an investment on this kind of application that is centered in patients' diagnosis?
I mean, thank you very much for the question. I think with the present information, I don't dare to answer whether it's investable, but if we scale it up towards the basics of what you were saying, it is true that diagnostics are kind of the ugly sibling in the healthcare. I always pull this data because I found it outstanding. Diagnostics are used in 66% of clinical decisions, but they only represent 5% of the cost. It's usually providers don't care about diagnostics. They don't even know about the diagnostic possibilities that they have available for patients that could really make a difference in the treatment. And yeah, it's difficult. It's a big market. There are many solutions, many attention points. And I would just say keep it up and work hard and try to make the most, try to identify the value proposition both for the patient, of course, but also for the provider who is going to be your prescriber. I don't know if I answered the question.
Completely agree with Jordi. Maybe just to add to it, just if we're brainstorming, it's usually helpful if you can already figure out what is the return on investment for the person that will pay for it, right? Maybe from that perspective, if you do a bit more work on like, if you use our solutions, this is your return on investment because maybe it cuts down the time you need to do a certain workflow from that perspective, because ultimately, as Jordi said, since it's such a small percentage, it's not the priority that people think about, but if you can somehow show, look, this is the money that you would be saving, hence it makes sense for you to get this solution, that might be a route to get their attention. But yeah, just a thought.
Mm-hmm. So thank you very much. We've run out of time. I think it has been a very interesting panel. So I want to thank all of you for your time and also you for your attention. So thank you very much. And let's see us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Veronica. Thank you very much to all of you.